Last week, the federal government almost shut down, and it didn't largely because of one person, and that's Senator Chuck Schumer. This is the Senate minority leader, and he agreed to a Republican funding bill. Many people in his own party, which is the Democrat Party, they were outraged. Why did he do it? Let's get into it. This month, the government was about to run out of money again. This happens every year, but this time is a little bit different. You have President Trump back in the White House, both chambers of Congress, you have a Republican majority. So the Democrats are looking for any type of leverage they can use. And the Republicans, they proposed a CR, 6-month continuing resolution bill. Now, the Democrats didn't want that. What the Democrats wanted was a 30-day continuing resolution bill. Why 30 days? They wanted more time to negotiate the nuances, the stipulations of that bill, but they didn't get it. The final bill was partisan. It cuts non-defense spending by $13 billion, and it boosts military and deportations by $6 billion. Chuck Schumer had a choice: fight it and risk a government shutdown, or cave in and give in to the Republican demands in order to avert a government shutdown, to keep the government running. Now, he was talking tough a couple of days before the shutdown. He was saying Republicans don't have the votes. He wanted a clean 30-day bill. The Republicans, they're not able to do this on their own. And he's right. Democrats had to cross the line in order to support this bill. Otherwise, it would have never happened. People are starting to call him Shutdown Schumer. That was his name, right? Agencies were preparing for it. A lot of the people I was talking to, they were anticipating it, but it never happened because we had a plot twist. On Thursday night, one day before the government shuts down, he flips like a pancake and he votes for the GOP bill. He directs the Democratic senators to vote for the GOP bill. Why? Because he says if the government shuts down, that gives President Trump and Doge and Elon Musk more power. Unchecked power where they can do further cuts. That's the message. So then on Friday, the Senate passes it 54-46, with 10 Democrats joining in. The government is now fully funded until the end of September. The Democratic Party, beyond upset. So why are the Democrats so mad? It's not just that Schumer caved, it is the way that he did it. You had House Democrats already reject the bill. They already voted against it. Chuck Schumer himself comes out and says this is a terrible bill. The one that he voted for, it is a terrible bill. And he rallied the Democratic senators. He was trying to put a stand. And the Democratic voters, they wanted a fight, some semblance of a fight. They're sick of President Trump, Elon Musk, and Doge, and they're sick of losing. And it's not just that he folded up fast. You had grassroots groups like Indivisible were calling for him to step down within minutes. AOC tells reporters, "We took risks to defend Social Security, Medicare, the American people, just to see Senate Democrats consider caving to Musk. It's betrayal." A lot of people are saying he could have leveraged for a better deal in order to get some of the language changed within the bills, because there's cuts here. So even if you shut down the government, let's say 1, 2, 3 days, maybe even a week, it doesn't have to be 30 days plus like we saw in 2018. It could have been something smaller to show that you have the fight in you in order to compromise, to not just lay down and take it, but to actually try to force some type of compromise, some sort of give and take. Well, that didn't happen. So let's see what the ramifications are. What are the consequences? Here's some of the cuts. It cuts rent subsidies for low-income and working Americans by over $700 million. It shortens the emergency food program by $20 million, which impacts thousands of people. It cuts $2 billion in projects to improve the safety of our airports, railways, roads, and ports across 50 states. And it cuts funding for the National Institute of Health by $280 million. Those are just a few of the highlights. There are more cuts in the bill. And I think the reason why he caved is probably he doesn't want to experience the backlash. He's already getting a backlash, and truth be told, this is a lose-lose situation. So whether he keeps the government open or whether he shuts it down, you're going to lose either way. So he's trying to pick the lesser of two evils. If the Democratic Party is being framed as the party that shuts the government down, Maybe he thinks that hurts their chances in the midterm. We have a midterm in about 19 months or so, probably a little bit less than that. November 2026, next year. Can the Democratic Party take over the House? Can they potentially regain some power in Congress? That's what he's looking at. That's what his advisors are probably telling him. What is the best move to try to get power come next year? Schumer knows he's under a lot of pressure. He's under a lot of criticism right now. So much so that he's postponing his book tour. He's worried about security at the book events. I didn't even know he had a book coming out. Did you? Let's look at some data. 2 surveys dropped this past weekend right after this mess. CNN says that the Democratic Party's favorability is at 29% among all Americans. That is the lowest since 1992. That is like a 33-year low. NBC News says that 27% of registered voters view the party positively. Also, all-time low since 1990. Those polls were given before the Senate vote, so you can only imagine that it has lowered since then. So why did he do it? Schumer's logic is simple. A shutdown would make things worse. President Trump and Doge, they would decide what is essential, what is not essential. So Trump really could have just kept it closed for multiple months, which would have created more damage. So he saw this as not ideal, but what is he going to do? So he decides to take it. That is seen by a lot of people as weakness. By making statements of, let's not make this worse, showing that you do not have the fight in you or you do not want to fight, people look at that and they say it's weak. One senator put it plainly, it's terrible versus awful. Schumer picked terrible. This continuing resolution is going to set a precedent when it comes to funding the government into the future. A lot of Republicans are looking at this right now as we're trying to make changes that will hopefully be permanent. But that's just not true. If you look in 2029, the next president could come in and issue out their own set of 100 plus executive orders and change every single thing that's being done right now. And I think Republicans are looking at it and saying, well, maybe we'll have all the power for the next 12 years. Maybe we have Donald Trump do his 4 years and then J.D. Vance does 8 years and we'll just keep this thing rolling for 12 years. And then in that time period, this will just become the norm. Well, although public opinion is definitely on President Trump's side right now, we don't see the true impact of his policies and his actions. Not yet, we don't, right? You lose close to 1 million federal employees, let's say. You lose over 1 million contractors, so that's 2 million people losing their jobs. Then in addition to that, you got thousands of people in the university, they're going to lose their jobs as a result of cut funding. And then, if you look at the tariffs, you have 5 million jobs that are being impacted, especially throughout rural America. So we're getting close to 10 million jobs just touching on a few things that we're seeing in the headlines right now. So although he's enjoying, let's say 50% plus favorability in the polls, public perception, public support is fickle. You have it one day and the next day you don't. What happens if the country goes into a recession or a deep recession because of some of these trade wars that we're seeing? How long will it take for his base to make a pivot and realize maybe these are not the best policies for me and my family? It could happen rather quick. But this whole thing isn't just about Chuck Schumer. It's about the Democrats trying to figure out how to fight Trump 2.0. The 2024 election has left them hurt and confused, and they want to understand, they want to know how can they win again. And this is kind of evident when you look out and see what some of the prominent members are doing. Look at Gavin Newsom, governor of California. He's starting a podcast. Look at Michelle Obama. Recently, she's starting a podcast. It seems that they're trying to build the equivalent of a Joe Rogan. They understand how influential, how impactful that Joe Rogan's podcast had, and they want to come up with a version of it for themselves. But I think really how you win people is you come to the center. A lot of Americans, I don't think they're far left or they're far right. They're more center-minded. Because if you just look at the right's political ideology or the left's political ideology, there's like a dozen boxes that you have to check. Okay, immigration. Okay, pro-choice. Okay, gun control. Okay, all this stuff that you have to check. How can you, being a free thinker that you are, How can you just look at one column and say, oh yeah, all my values and beliefs neatly fit into that one column? How is that true? I don't believe that for you. I don't think that's the truth. I think that maybe you agree with some things on the right and maybe you agree with some things on the left. I think most of us are centrist, people in the center. So when presidents have been elected in the past, let's say, I'm going to go out on a limb and say, look at President Obama. When President Obama was elected, a lot of people thought, well, he's going to be far left. He's going to be extreme, out of control. But what happened when he came in? Well, he was kind of tough on immigration. He was deporting a lot of people. He didn't give federal employees pay raises. He was looking to cut waste from Medicare and Social Security. He was looking to cut some of the fraud, waste, and abuse that we're seeing in the government. How could that be? Because he was to the left. Everybody was afraid and terrified of him from being a far left radical. He moved to the center. Same thing to a certain extent with George Bush. He moved to the center. Now, what we're seeing here with the dismantling of government, this is a little bit more extreme. And I think 99% of Americans, 99.9% of Americans, they can get behind a message of eliminate fraud, waste, and abuse. But when you do it in a reckless, insensitive manner, and you're doing it in ways that you're proving you're making the wrong choice by the reinstatements, by the freezing the funding and then reinstating the funding, allowing the funding to go through. When you're doing it like that, it doesn't send the right message to the American public. It satisfies a percentage of your base, and I would even say a large percent. But we are all Americans. We are all trying to provide value, take care of our families. All of us are across this country, regardless if you're in the private sector, if you're in the public sector, or even if you are in the military. We're all striving to do those things. So I don't understand why there's such deep division. I understand far right and far left. I got that. But that's not most of us. So I don't get the deep division. Okay, if you want to understand more about the upcoming layoffs, the upcoming reductions within the federal government, there's something called retention standings. It's different depending on your agency. It will determine whether or not you're going to be able to keep your job or not. If you want to know more about that, check this video out next. Stay updated by signing up to the free newsletter down below. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.